Little Jiho Kim was only 6 years old when his world changed forever. He loved playing in the crystal gardens behind his family's home on New Haven Colony. The purple crystals grew tall like trees, and when the twin suns hit them just right, they made rainbow patterns dance across the ground. Jiho would chase these colored lights for hours, laughing as they moved with the breeze. New Haven was a peaceful place. Families had come here to start fresh, to build something beautiful far from the chaos of the inner worlds. The colonists grew exotic fruits that sparkled like jewels and raised gentle creatures that hummed lullabies. Children played safely in the streets while their parents worked in the fields or tended to the crystal farms that made their little world so special. That morning started like any other. Jiho's mother, Mrs. Kim, was preparing breakfast when she heard the rumble. At first she thought it was thunder from the morning storms that sometimes rolled across their valley. But thunder doesn't shake the ground like that. Thunder doesn't block out the sun. The Imperial hegemony ships came down like falling mountains. 3 massive warships, each one bigger than their entire town, descended through the clouds with engines that roared like angry beasts. The ships were dark gray, covered in weapons and strange symbols that hurt to look at. They landed in the main square, crushing the fountain that the colonists had built together just last year. Jiho stopped chasing the rainbow lights. He stood perfectly still, his small hand pressed against one of the crystal trees, watching as soldiers poured out of the ships. These weren't like the friendly human traders who sometimes visited. These aliens were tall and thin, with skin like metal and eyes that glowed red in their strange helmets. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. "Routine inspection," announced their commander through a voice amplifier that made his words sound like grinding metal. "All civilians remain in designated areas. Compliance is mandatory." The colonists gathered nervously in small groups. They had done nothing wrong. New Haven was registered, their taxes paid, their permits current. But the Imperial soldiers moved through their town like they owned it, scanning buildings with handheld devices and marking things with symbols the humans couldn't read. Private Zelthan was young for an Imperial soldier, barely past his training cycles. His weapon felt heavy in his hands, and the strange atmosphere of this human world made him nervous. The gravity was different here, lighter than his home planet. When he turned to scan another building, his foot slipped on the smooth crystal pathway. The energy rifle discharged. The bolt of pure energy crossed the garden in less than a heartbeat. Jiho Kim, still standing by his favorite crystal tree, still watching the strange visitors with curious 6-year-old eyes, was struck instantly. There was no pain, no cry for help. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, leaving only a small shadow burned into the crystal behind him. Mrs. Kim's scream shattered the morning quiet. Commander Velkris barely glanced at the scene. He made a quick note in his report log and ordered his troops to continue the inspection. To him, it was just another entry in a routine patrol report, one less primitive to worry about, but he was wrong. This was no routine accident. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment humanity remembered why they had once been feared across the galaxy. The crystal trees around Jiho's shadow began to dim, as if the light itself was mourning. The news traveled faster than light itself. Within 3 hours of Jiho's death, every human settlement in the galaxy knew what had happened. The message spread through quantum communications networks, passed from ship to ship, colony to colony, until it reached the farthest corners of human space. On Terra Prime, the capital world of the Terran Federation, Admiral Minho Park was reviewing routine patrol reports when his aide burst into his office. The young officer's face was pale, his hands shaking as he handed over the encrypted message from New Haven Colony. Admiral Park read the report twice, then a third time. Each word felt like a physical blow. Jiho Kim, 6 years old, killed during routine Imperial inspection. No charges filed. Case closed, but it wasn't just another casualty report to Admiral Park. Jiho was his grandson, the bright-eyed boy who video-called him every week to show off his drawings and tell stories about the Crystal Gardens. The child who wanted to be a starship captain just like his grandfather, who practiced saluting in the mirror and dreamed of exploring distant worlds. Park's hands didn't shake when he activated the emergency communication system. They were steady as stone, cold as the Yao, space between stars. He sent coded messages to every human military installation, every colony defense force, every ship captain he had served with over the past 40 years. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Within hours, human diplomats were demanding emergency sessions with the Galactic Council. Ambassador Sumi Lee, known for her calm negotiation style, spoke with a voice that could cut steel as she presented humanity's formal complaint to the imperial hegemony. "We demand justice," she told the assembled alien delegates. "We demand the immediate surrender of the soldier responsible and formal acknowledgement of this crime against an innocent child." The imperial response came within the day, delivered by Ambassador Thexidal, a creature that looked like a walking skeleton wrapped in dark robes. His voice carried the arrogance of a 1,000-year empire that had never known defeat. "The death of one primitive is of no consequence to the imperial hegemony," he announced to the Galactic Council chambers. "Your species exists at our sufferance. Continue these pathetic complaints, and we will demonstrate what true consequences look like. The colony of New Haven can be sterilized from orbit within hours." The threat hung in the chamber like poison gas. The other species, dozens of different alien races that made up the Galactic Council, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone knew the imperial hegemony's reputation. Worlds that defied them became glass parking lots, entire civilizations, reduced to cosmic dust. But what the Empire didn't understand was that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They had threatened human children. They had dismissed human grief. They had forgotten that the peaceful traders and diplomats they knew were not the full measure of humanity. On distant worlds, in hidden shipyards that hadn't seen activity for 2 centuries, old machines began to wake up. Admiral Park's coded messages had reached people who remembered the old ways, who had sworn oaths that most humans had forgotten. The galaxy knew humans as merchants, farmers, and peacekeepers. What they didn't know was that humanity had once been something very different, something that had nearly destroyed itself before learning to choose peace over power. That peace had lasted for 200 years, but it was about to end because the Empire had broken the one rule that could never be forgiven. They had killed a human child and called it acceptable. The ripple effect had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their floating seats watching as 3 humans walked to the center platform. The massive dome overhead showed the swirling colors of the galaxy, but all eyes were focused on the figures below. Admiral Minho Park led the way, his gray uniform bearing medals from conflicts most species had never heard of. Behind him walked Admiral Jiwon Lee, her face carved from ice, and General Dae Kim, whose presence seemed to make the air itself heavier. These weren't the usual human diplomats with their soft voices and endless patience. These were something else entirely, the alien representatives whispered among themselves. The Zenthari ambassador, whose species had ruled star systems for millennia, found himself nervous for the first time in decades. The crystalline beings from Nexus Prime vibrated with frequencies that spoke of ancient fear. Even the machine intelligences of the core worlds ran calculations they hadn't needed for centuries. Admiral Park stepped up to the speaking platform. He didn't use the traditional greeting. He didn't bow to the council elder or ask permission to address the assembly. He simply began to speak, and his voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber without amplification. 6 days ago, your imperial hegemony murdered a human child, he said. Each word fell like a hammer strike. 6-year-old Jiho Kim died because a soldier was careless with his weapon. When we asked for justice, you called us primitives. When we demanded accountability, you threatened to burn our worlds. The imperial section of the chamber stirred. Ambassador Thexdal rose from his seat, his skeletal frame clicking as he moved. The hegemony does not answer to lesser species. Your complaints are noted and dismissed. Park turned to face the imperial delegation directly. You misunderstand the situation. I am not here to complain. I am here to inform you of what happens next. Something in his tone made the chamber even quieter. Species that had been whispering fell silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed to fade. You have 7 standard days, Park continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. 7 days to find Private Zelthan and deliver him to New Haven Colony for trial. 7 days to issue a formal apology for the murder of an innocent child. 7 days to acknowledge that human lives have value. Admiral Lee stepped forward. If you do these things, this matter ends here. Jiho's parents will have justice, and we will return to our farms and shops and quiet lives. General Kim was the one who delivered the final words, and when he spoke, something ancient and terrible seemed to echo in his voice. But if you refuse, if you continue to treat human death as acceptable, then I suggest you run. Run far. Run. Fast and pray to whatever gods you worship, that we never find you. The laughter started in the Imperial section. Ambassador Thextel's rasping chuckle was joined by his subordinates, then by some of the other species, who had always seen humans as harmless. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Threats from merchants and farmers, Thextel sneered. Your species has no military worth mentioning. Your ships are cargo haulers. Your weapons are farming tools. What exactly do you think you can do against the might of the Imperial hegemony? Admiral Park smiled then, and that smile was the most terrifying thing anyone in the chamber had ever seen. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets that could reshape the galaxy. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting 200 years for this moment. You'll find out, he said simply, and turned to leave. The warning had been given. The galaxy would soon learn what humanity had been hiding. The Imperial hegemony had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, enslaved entire species, and turned proud civilizations into dust. When primitive humans dared to threaten them, there was only one response that made sense: total war. Emperor Malthius himself gave the order from his throne room on the capital world. These insects need to be taught their place, he declared to his war council. Strike 3 of their colonies simultaneously. Make examples of them. Let the galaxy see what happens when lesser beings forget their station. Within hours, 3 massive Imperial fleets launched from staging areas across the galaxy. Each fleet contained enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The commanders were veterans of 100 campaigns, experienced in the art of making civilizations disappear. Fleet. Admiral Korath commanded the largest force, heading straight for the agricultural world of green fields. His ships had glassed rebellious worlds before. This would be routine work. Admiral Vexis took her fleet toward the mining colony of Iron Ridge, where humans extracted rare metals from asteroid belts. Admiral Zephon's armada targeted the research station on Bright Star, where human scientists studied peaceful applications of quantum technology. The Imperial commanders expected to find panicked colonists begging for mercy. They expected to broadcast the destruction of human settlements across the galaxy as a warning to any other species that might dare challenge Imperial authority. Instead, they found something that would haunt their nightmares forever: empty worlds. Admiral Korath's massive dreadnought, the Eternal Dominion, dropped out of hyperspace above green fields, expecting to see a planet covered in farms and small cities. Instead, his sensors showed abandoned settlements, empty spaceports, and not a single life sign on the entire world. Scan again, he ordered his bridge crew. The results came back the same. Green fields was deserted, as if every human had simply vanished into thin air. Admiral Vexis found the same thing at Iron Ridge. The mining platforms were still operational, automated systems continuing their work, but every human had disappeared. Coffee cups still sat warm on tables in the break rooms. Children's toys lay scattered in empty playgrounds. It was as if the entire population had been warned and evacuated in perfect coordination. At Bright Star Research Station, Admiral Zephon's fleet found the most disturbing sight of all. The station was not only empty, but had been completely stripped of technology. Every computer, every research device, every piece of advanced equipment had been removed with surgical precision. Only empty rooms remained, and a single message. Displayed on the main communication screen: "You were warned." Back on the Imperial capital, Emperor Malthius raged at the reports. "Find them," he screamed at his intelligence officers. Entire populations don't just disappear. Where did they go? But that was the wrong question. The right question was what they had taken with them when they left. Unknown to the Empire, humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Not obviously, not in ways that would attract attention, but quietly, methodically, with the patience of a species that had learned hard lessons about survival. Every human colony had evacuation plans that could be executed within hours. Every civilian had practiced emergency drills disguised as safety exercises. Every family knew exactly where to go and what to bring when the signals came from Terra Prime. But more importantly, the evacuations had freed up something the Empire didn't know existed. In hidden facilities throughout human space, in shipyards built inside hollow asteroids, in bases carved into the dark sides of moons, military forces that officially didn't exist began to emerge from 2 centuries of secrecy. Captain Sunwoo Nam received his activation codes while his ship drifted in the shadow of a dead planet. The codes hadn't been used since the Great Exile, when humanity had fled Earth and sworn never again to make war. But that oath had always contained one exception, the E. Protection of human children was worth any price. In the cold darkness between stars, something ancient began to stir. For 200 years they had slept in the void, hidden in places where no scanner could find them, waiting for a signal that everyone hoped would never come. The signal came at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Captain Sunwoo Nam was drifting near the edge of the Kepler Nebula when his console lit up with codes he had memorized but never expected to use. His hands trembled slightly as he entered the verification sequence. Around him, his small crew of 12 watched in silence as systems that had been dormant for generations came online. Activation confirmed, his communications officer whispered. Project Sleeper is now active across all sectors. Sunwoo had been born on a peaceful farming world. He had joined the merchant marine to see the galaxy, to trade with alien species and learn about their cultures. But his real job, the one his family had prepared him for since childhood, was something entirely different. He was a guardian, part of a secret network that most humans didn't even know existed. Deep in the asteroid field around him, massive shapes began to move. What had appeared to be ordinary rocks for decades revealed themselves as something else entirely. Camouflaged, hulls retracted their disguises, showing sleek warships underneath. Engines that could tear holes in space-time flickered to life after centuries of silence. The ship that emerged from the largest asteroid was beyond anything the current galaxy had ever seen. It was 3 kilometers long, its hull made from materials that seemed to bend light around them. This was the Silent Thunder, a dreadnought from the old wars, when humanity had been something very different from the peaceful traders the galaxy knew. Similar awakenings happened throughout human space. Admiral Hyeon Choi watched from the bridge of her command ship as an entire fleet materialized from what had appeared to be empty space. Ships that were older than some civilizations, carrying weapons that violated several galactic treaties, crewed by people whose families had kept terrible secrets for generations. "Status report," she ordered, though her voice remained calm despite the magnitude of what was happening. 73 heavy battleships coming online in Sector 7, her tactical officer reported. 41 carriers deploying in the outer rim. Moonbase Prometheus is fully operational and launching hunter squadrons. Moonbase Prometheus was perhaps the most frightening sight of all. Built inside a rogue planet that wandered between star systems, it had been humanity's greatest secret for 2 centuries. From the outside, it looked like any other dead world. Inside, it was a factory that could build warships faster than most. Species could count them. Captain Yuna Seo commanded one of the strangest vessels in humanity's hidden fleet. Her ship, the Probability Storm, didn't just travel through space. It could change the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. It was technology that humanity had developed during their darkest period, when they had nearly destroyed themselves, learning to manipulate reality itself. "Ma'am," her science officer called out, "we're receiving deployment orders. Multiple fleets are being assigned to Imperial border systems." But the most terrifying weapons in humanity's arsenal weren't the big ships or the reality-bending technology. They were small, barely larger than fighters, and they moved through space like sharks through water. The AI-controlled hunter-killers had been humanity's most shameful creation, thinking machines built for one purpose: to hunt down and destroy enemy forces with perfect efficiency. Humanity had sworn never to use them again after the Great Exile. They had been too effective, too ruthless, too much like the monsters humanity had once been. But they had kept them, maintained them, because sometimes the only way to stop a monster was to become one yourself. Admiral Park's final message reached every Guardian simultaneously. The Empire killed our child and called it acceptable. Show them why we left that life behind. Show them what we are capable of when our restraint is removed. Across the galaxy, ancient war machines prepared for battle. The peaceful traders were about to remind the universe why some species choose peace not from weakness, but from wisdom. The sleeping giants were awake, and they were very, very angry. The first Imperial border world to go silent was Kethtar Prime, a fortress planet that guarded one of the major trade routes into Imperial space. It had massive orbital defense platforms, thousands of soldiers, and enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The planet's last transmission was routine. All systems normal, patrol schedules maintained. 8 hours later, silence. Admiral Vorthak commanded the rescue fleet sent to investigate. He was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a warrior who had seen rebellions crushed and entire species brought to heel. As his ships dropped out of hyperspace near Kethtar Prime, he expected to find the aftermath of some terrorist attack, maybe a few destroyed facilities that his engineers could repair. Instead, he found something that made his blood freeze in his veins. The orbital defense platforms were still there, but they had been turned inside out. Massive weapons systems that should have taken months to dismantle had been carefully taken apart piece by piece, their components arranged in perfect geometric patterns that spelled out a message in ancient galactic standard: "You were warned." The planet below showed no signs of bombardment, no craters or burned cities. Every Imperial facility was intact, but completely empty. Weapons had been removed, computers wiped clean, but not a single building had been damaged. It was surgical, precision on a planetary scale. "Sir," his communications officer called out, voice shaking, "we're receiving a transmission." The message came through on all frequencies simultaneously, spoken in perfect Imperial dialect by a human voice. "You had 7 days. You chose poorly. This is what restraint looks like. The next worlds will not be so fortunate." Admiral Vorthak's fleet jumped to the next system, then the next. Each time they found the same thing: Imperial worlds stripped clean of military assets, but with civilian populations untouched. It was impossible, unthinkable. No known force in the galaxy could move with such speed and precision. Then they encountered the humans directly. Commander Taiho Yun's task force materialized out of what had appeared to be empty space, their ships becoming visible only when they chose to be seen. The Imperial fleet outnumbered them 3-1, carried heavier weapons, and had superior armor. On paper, it should have been a massacre. It was. Just not the kind Admiral Vorthak expected. The human ships moved like they were dancing, anticipating every Imperial move before it was made. Their weapons didn't just destroy Imperial vessels, they turned them against each other. Vorthak watched, in horror as his own ship's targeting systems were hijacked, forcing them to fire on their allies. How are they doing this? He screamed at his tactical officer. The answer came in the form of small dark shapes that had somehow penetrated his flagship's shields. Hunter-killers, AI drones so advanced they could think faster than biological minds could process. They swarmed through his ship's systems like a virus, taking control of everything from life support to weapons systems. But the most terrifying part wasn't the technology, it was the restraint. Even as they dismantled his fleet piece by piece, the humans were careful. Every escape pod was allowed to launch safely. Every surrender signal was acknowledged. When Imperial crews abandoned their disabled ships, human vessels appeared to collect them, treating wounded enemies with the same care they would show their own people. Commander Yoon's voice came over the communication channel, calm and professional. Admiral Vorthak, your fleet is disabled, but your crews are safe. You will be returned to Imperial space with a message for your Emperor. Tell him that humanity remembers the old ways of war, but we choose to show mercy. This choice may not be extended indefinitely. As Vorthak's escape pod drifted toward a human rescue ship, he understood something that chilled him more than any threat could have. These weren't conquerors seeking territory or glory. These were gardeners, carefully pruning away what they considered weeds while preserving everything else. The Empire had awakened something that fought like demons but showed mercy like angels, and he had no idea which was more terrifying. The footage came from a damaged Imperial spy drone that had somehow survived the Battle of Nexus Gate. When the recording reached the Galactic Council, it changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. The video showed ships that defied physics itself, human vessels that could fold space around them, moving through solid matter like it was empty air, weapons that didn't destroy enemy ships, but simply made them cease to exist as if they had never been built in the first place. Most disturbing of all were the massive constructs that looked like living metal, reshaping themselves for different tasks with fluid grace. Ambassador Thexdal, the skeletal Imperial representative, played the footage for the Emergency Council session. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something none of them had ever seen from the Imperial hegemony before. Fear. "This is impossible," whispered the Zenthari ambassador, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. "No species has technology this advanced. Where did they get these weapons?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Elder Voss, the ancient keeper of the Galactic Archives, spoke for the first time in 50 years. His voice was like dust and old paper, but every word carried the weight of forgotten history. "I remember the humans' arrival," he said slowly. 200 years ago, when they came to us as refugees, they said they were fleeing a dying world, seeking peace among the stars. We welcomed them as we would any species in need." The chamber fell silent. Elder Voss rarely spoke, and when he did, it was usually to share knowledge that others had forgotten. "But there were rumors," he continued. "Stories from the deep traders, the merchants who traveled the dark spaces between galaxies. They spoke of a species that had nearly destroyed itself, that had developed weapons capable of rewriting the laws of reality. They called them the Reality Shapers, or the Void Gardeners. The Nexus Prime Collective, a group mind composed of billions of individual crystal beings, suddenly resonated with frequencies of ancient terror. "The Gardeners," they said in unison. "We remember the warnings passed down through quantum networks, a species so advanced they could cultivate stars like flowers or snuff them out like candles. Captain Hana Bay's fleet was currently demonstrating exactly what the archives had warned about. Her ships moved through an Imperial system, not destroying it, but reorganizing it. Dead planets were moved into better orbital positions. Asteroid fields were reformed into defensive networks. The system's star itself was somehow made to burn brighter and cleaner." "They're not just winning battles," observed Ambassador Zektala from the peaceful Harmony worlds. "They're improving everything they touch. Look at the former Imperial territories. Crime has dropped to zero. Slave populations have been freed and relocated to better worlds. Even the ecosystems are being restored." The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Humanity's merchant ships, the ones that had traded peacefully throughout the galaxy for centuries, had been carrying more than cargo. They had been mapping every system, cataloging every species, learning the strengths and weaknesses of every civilization they encountered. But more disturbing than their military power was their restraint. Captain Yunaseo's forces had just liberated 17 slave worlds in a single day, but they hadn't harmed a single civilian. Instead, they had carefully relocated populations, rebuilt infrastructure, and left behind automated systems to maintain peace and prosperity. "They're not conquering," realized Ambassador Thexdal, his metallic voice cracking with understanding. "They're gardening. They're reshaping the galaxy into something better." The Galactic Council watched in fascination and terror as humanity revealed their true nature. They weren't the simple farmers and traders everyone had believed them to be. They were apex predators who had chosen to be gardeners, cosmic forces who had decided to nurture rather than destroy. But the question that haunted every representative was simple. What happened when a species this powerful decided that the current galaxy wasn't worth saving? The answer was becoming clear with each passing day. Humanity was showing the universe what it could become under proper guidance. The Empire's 1,000-year reign of terror was ending not with fire and destruction, but with careful cultivation and impossible mercy. The galaxy was being remade, one system at a time, by beings who could have destroyed it all with a thought. The imperial capital world of Dominion Prime had never known fear. For 1,000 years, it had been the center of galactic power, home to Emperor Malthius and the heart of an empire that stretched across millions of worlds. Its orbital defenses could destroy entire fleets, and its armies were legendary throughout the galaxy. But as General Wu Jin's forces approached the system, something unprecedented happened. The mighty Imperial fleet, the largest military force ever assembled, simply surrendered. Admiral Korath, the same commander who had found empty worlds instead of helpless colonists, transmitted an unconditional surrender before the human ships even entered the system. His message was simple. "We have seen what you are capable of. We will not sacrifice billions of lives for the pride of one man." Emperor Malthius watched from his throne room as his greatest admirals, warriors who had conquered civilizations, knelt before communication screens and begged the humans for mercy. Not for themselves, but for their families, their worlds, their people. "Cowards!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "I am Emperor of the Galaxy. No primitive species will dictate terms to me." General Jin's response came through every communication device on the planet, simultaneously. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Emperor Malthius," he said, "we have dismantled your empire not through conquest, but through liberation. Every world you enslaved now governs itself. Every species you oppressed now lives in peace. Your fleet has surrendered because they understand what you refuse to see. Your reign of terror is over. We have one final demand. Surrender Private Zelthan, the soldier who killed Jiho Kim. Place him in our custody for trial. Do this, and you will be allowed to live out your days in exile. Refuse, and face the consequences of your choices." The Emperor's laughter filled the throne room, high and manic. "One soldier? You've destroyed my empire for one worthless soldier who accidentally killed one insignificant child? You're insane." That was when humanity showed the galaxy what true power looked like. They didn't bombard the planet. They didn't send invasion fleets or deploy superweapons. Instead, they did something far more terrifying. They simply turned off the Imperial infrastructure. Every computer system on Dominion Prime stopped working simultaneously. Communication networks went dark. Transportation systems shut down. The orbital defenses, the planetary shields, even the basic life support systems in government buildings. Everything just stopped. But civilian systems continued working perfectly. Hospitals kept running. Homes kept their power. Schools stayed open. The humans had somehow reached into the heart of the Imperial capital and surgically removed only the tools of oppression, leaving everything else untouched. "How?" Malthius whispered, staring at his dead command screens. "How is this possible?" Admiral Sominko's fleet materialized in orbit, their ships appearing like ghosts made solid. But instead of weapons platforms, they deployed something else entirely. Construction drones that began rebuilding the planet's infrastructure, not as tools of empire, but as systems of service. Within hours, former Imperial slaves were being relocated to better worlds aboard human transport ships. The massive weapon factories were being converted into manufacturing centers for medical supplies and farming equipment. The feared Imperial Academy, where officers were trained to crush rebellions, was being transformed into a school for children. "Private Zelthan will be transferred to our custody within the hour," came an announcement from the planet's surface. The Imperial military had made the decision without their Emperor's permission. They had seen what resistance meant, not destruction, but irrelevance. As Malthius watched his empire dissolve around him, he began to understand the terrible truth. The humans weren't conquerors. They were gardeners, and they had decided that his empire was a weed that needed to be carefully removed so that something better could grow in its place. Private Zelthan was placed aboard a human transport ship, bound for New Haven Colony, where Jiho's parents would decide his fate. The 1,000-year imperial hegemony officially ceased to exist, not with a bang, but with the quiet efficiency of a species that had learned to choose life over death. The reckoning was complete, and mercy had proven more powerful than any weapon. The B, transport ship carrying Private Zelthan, touched down on New Haven Colony, just as the twin suns were setting behind the Crystal Gardens, the same gardens where little Jiho Kim had played, where rainbow lights had danced across the ground, where a child's laughter had been silenced forever. Mr. and Mrs. Kim stood waiting on the landing platform, holding hands. They looked older than they had just weeks before, aged by grief that no parent should have to bear. Behind them stood the entire population of New Haven, humans who had lost their innocence but found something else in its place. The knowledge that they were not alone in the universe. Admiral Park stepped off the transport first, followed by 2 guards escorting the young Imperial soldier. Zelthan looked nothing like the arrogant aliens who had invaded their world. He was barely more than a child himself, his red eyes wide with fear and something else, genuine remorse. "Mrs. Kim," Admiral Park said gently, "this is the soldier, responsible for your son's death. Under galactic law, his fate is yours to decide." The colony fell silent. Even the crystal trees seemed to stop their gentle humming, waiting for the words that would define what humanity had become through this tragedy. Mrs. Kim stepped forward, studying the face of the being who had taken her child's life. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice that carried the strength of every mother who had ever lost a child, she spoke. "You were afraid," she said to Zelthan. "Your weapon discharged because you were nervous, because you were young and far from home. My son died because of your fear." Zelthan's translator struggled with the alien emotion in his voice as he replied, I'm sorry. I know those words mean nothing, but I dream of his face every night. I would give anything to undo what I did." "So would I," Mrs. Kim said simply. "But we cannot bring back the dead. We can only choose what we do with the living." She turned to address not just the colony, but the recording devices that would carry her words across the galaxy. "My son Jiho believed in kindness. He fed the crystal birds even when they stole his toys. He helped smaller children when they fell. He saw the good in everything. If I choose revenge, if I demand this young soldier's death, what lesson does that teach? What kind of galaxy do we create for the children who remain?" Mrs. Kim faced Zelthan again. "You will return to your people, but not as a prisoner. You will tell them what you have seen here. You will speak of a species that chose mercy over vengeance, understanding over hatred. You will remember my son not as a casualty of war, but as the child who saved your life through his mother's forgiveness." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Representatives from every known species came to New Haven Colony for the memorial service. The Crystal Gardens were filled with beings who had once been enemies, now united in grief for a child they had never met. The memorial stone was simple, made from the same crystals that Jiho had loved to play among. It bore his name, his age, and a single line that would become humanity's promise to the galaxy. "In memory of all children, may they play in gardens of peace." Admiral Park gave the final address, his words carrying to every world, every ship, every being capable of listening. "We came to the stars not to conquer, but to find peace," he said. "We found it by choosing to be gardeners rather than warriors, builders rather than destroyers. Today we plant a seed in this garden, the seed of a galaxy where children of all species can play without fear." As the service ended and the representatives began their journey home, humanity's fleets quietly withdrew to their hidden bases. The great warships returned to their sleep among the asteroids. The terrible weapons were locked away once more. But the galaxy had been changed forever. Former imperial worlds governed themselves with wisdom learned from human example. Trade flowed freely between species that had once been enemies. Children across the galaxy learned Jiho's story and the lesson his death had taught, that true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to forgive. The crystal. Gardens grew brighter than ever before, and in their light the galaxy found hope.